Well, almost a year later to the day, they finally came out with some serious charges.
Seditious Conspiracy.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie. And a story that I had been following closely from day one is the January 6th, let me just get my hands out here, insurrection. The January 6th insurrection, which just celebrated its 1-year anniversary, and people made something of a big deal of the 1-year anniversary of the so-called insurrection. The media, pundits, politicians were calling it an insurrection, even though there were actually no charges of insurrection levied against any of the people who were arrested in connection with the events. They were charged with trespassing. Well, it seems today the Oath Keepers have been charged with seditious conspiracy. And if you've never heard of the Oath Keepers and you've never heard of seditious conspiracy, well, you're going to learn about it right now. Oath Keepers, from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. For the Game of Thrones episode, see Oath Keeper, not to be confused with Promise Keepers. Wikipedia, I know I don't get out much, but I have no idea what you just said. I have never seen one episode of Game of Thrones, that television show. But I suspect that there are a great many people who have never heard of the Oath Keepers until now, so Merrick Garland, welcome to the Streisand Effect. Oath Keepers is an American far-right anti-government militia whose members claim to be defending the Constitution of the United States. It encourages its members to disobey orders which they believe would violate the U.S. Constitution. Research on their membership determined that 2/3 of the Oath Keepers are former military or law enforcement, and 1/10 are active duty military or law enforcement. Most research determined the Oath Keeper membership to be approximately 5,000 members, while leaked data showed Oath Keeper rosters claiming membership of 38,000. And then just to briefly get into some of the pot calling the kettle black, several organizations that monitor U.S. domestic terrorism and hate groups describe the group as extremist or radical. In 2015, Mark Pitcavaj of the Anti-Defamation League described the group as, quote, heavily armed extremists with a conspiratorial and anti-government mindset looking for potential showdowns with the government, end quote. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the group's leadership has ties to anti-government extremist groups and espouses a number of conspiracy and legal theories associated with the sovereign citizen movement and posse comitatus movement, chiefly that sheriffs are the highest law enforcement authorities in America. SPLC fellow Mark Potok describes the group as a whole as, quote, really just an anti-government group who believe in a wild set of conspiracy theories, end quote. I suspect there's a lot of people out there who believe that calling people conspiracy theorists no longer carries the same weight and baggage that it once upon a time did, whether it's believing in the conspiracy theory that the coronavirus might have originated or leaked from a lab in China, the conspiracy theory of the Great Reset, a number of other conspiracy theories that 2 years later have become mainstream headlines. So while on another day, another channel, I might be interested in fleshing out what these so-called conspiracy theories are that the Oath Keepers subscribe to, according to these people, but that is a story for another day and another channel. Let's just get to the headline, which is 11 members of the Oath Keepers have been arrested on seditious conspiracy charges. From the BBC, Capitol Riot, Oath Keepers leader charged with seditious conspiracy. The leader of far-right militia group, the Oath Keepers, has been charged with seditious conspiracy over last year's attack on the U.S. Capitol. Stewart Rhodes was among 11 people to be charged with the crime on Thursday. He was arrested at his home in Texas, according to his lawyer. This is the first time the sedition charge has been applied over the
deadly riot.
I had been covering this story from the very beginning, breaking it down and explaining the twists and turns along the way, including the deaths of the individuals at the riot, because even that has evolved over time, where now it seems that maybe there were only actually 2 people who were in fact killed at the riot, Ashley Babbitt and Roseanne Boylan, and all the other people who died at that riot died of natural causes, medical emergencies, or other issues that might have wrongly been attributed to being killed at the riot
at the time this was initially reported.
So while the BBC is technically correct in referring to this as a deadly riot, there is an asterisk to the term deadly, and at least the BBC is using the term riot and not insurrection. Trump supporters stormed Congress in January 2021 as it was meeting to certify Joe Biden's victory. More than 725 people have been arrested for the attack, which shocked the world. That is something of a lofty way of describing how the world reacted to the events of January 6th, and I'm not really sure how you assess a global reaction in the first place. That being said, I think there might be people out there who might be saying what was shocking to the rest of the world was not only the events of January 6th, but the rather politicized prosecution of the people allegedly involved. The over-the-top, and some might even dare say malicious prosecution of the people allegedly involved in the incident who were detained for months on end, some of them in solitary confinement for crimes that were not even violent crimes at their origin, for trespass crimes. But alas, it seems that over a year later, after one of the most thorough and costly investigations in U.S. history, Merrick Garland has found his individuals to charge with seditious conspiracy. It just sounds so dangerous to say, seditious conspiracy, but what is it? Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute, 18 U.S. Code, Section 2384, seditious conspiracy. If two or more persons in any state or territory, or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both. That is the provision of law, but I am a mere Quebec attorney, and I have no idea how this provision of law has been interpreted by the courts in the United States. I have no idea how many people have even been prosecuted under this provision of law, but from what I understand, it is not that many. We will get there, but just getting back to the article, who are the individuals who were charged? Mr. Rhodes, a 56-year-old former U.S. paratrooper and Yale-educated lawyer, is accused of conspiring with others to, quote, oppose by force the execution of the laws governing the transfer of presidential power, end quote. The Department of Justice accuses Mr. Rhodes of working with other Oath Keepers, a loosely knit militia that believes the U.S. government has been corrupted by elites to transport weapons and ammunition to Washington, D.C. in their effort to block Mr. Biden's presidency. Yup, one of those absurd and outlandish conspiracy theories that the governments of the world have been corrupted by elites. Later in the vlog, I'm going to go over certain sections of the indictments which were recently unsealed because they do contain some relatively serious allegations, but you will forgive people for being somewhat skeptical in the timing of this, in that for the last year, one of the biggest criticisms of this investigation is that the only people prosecuted were prosecuted for non-violent crimes, basically trespass crimes. It's only a year later, on the anniversary of the January 6th riot, that Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice finally come out with some serious charges. A growing number of Republicans had questioned the seriousness of the Capitol riot given the lack of sedition or treason charges. This may in part be an answer to that argument, reports the BBC's Barbara Plett-Usher in Washington. Alex Friedfeld, a researcher for the Anti-Defamation League's Center on Extremism, said the new sedition charges were a, quote, big deal, end quote, that marked an, quote, escalation, end quote, by the prosecution. Quote, up until this point, people have been charged for interrupting a federal process or for violence that they did outside. This is the first time that they're acknowledging a plot against the government on that day, end quote, he said. The timing is suspicious or convenient to say the least. Merrick Garland, who we now know has been under tremendous political pressure to go after pretty much everyone and anyone involved, has to show some fruits of his labor, and so they come out with these charges against 11 members of the Oath Keepers. And I've got to tell you something, if people did not know who the Oath Keepers were before this, they certainly will know them now. The United States Department of Justice, Justice News, for immediate release, Thursday, January 13, 2022. Leader of Oath Keepers and 10 other individuals indicted in federal court for seditious conspiracy and other offenses related to U.S. Capitol breach. 8 others facing charges in 2 related cases. A federal grand jury in the District of Columbia returned an indictment yesterday, which was unsealed today, charging 11 defendants with seditious conspiracy and other charges for crimes related to the breach of the U.S. Capitol on Jan 6, which disrupted a joint session of the U.S. Congress that was in the process of ascertaining and counting the electoral votes related to the presidential election. The broad brushstrokes summary of the indictment from the Department of Justice website. The seditious conspiracy indictment alleges that following the November 3, 2020 presidential election, Rhodes conspired with his co-defendants and others to oppose by force the execution of the laws governing the transfer of presidential power by January 20, 2021. Beginning in late December 2020 via encrypted and private communications applications, Rhodes and various co-conspirators coordinated and planned to travel to Washington, D.C. on or around Jan 6, 2021, the date of the certification of the Electoral College vote, the indictment alleges. Rhodes and several co-conspirators made plans to bring weapons to the area to support the operation. The co-conspirators then traveled across the country to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area in early January 2021. According to the seditious conspiracy indictment, the defendants conspired through a variety of manners and means, including organizing into teams that were prepared and willing to use force and to transport firearms and ammunition into Washington, D.C., recruiting members and affiliates to participate in the conspiracy, organizing trainings to teach and learn paramilitary combat tactics, bringing and contributing paramilitary gear, weapons, and supplies, including knives, batons, camouflage combat uniforms, tactical tactical vests with pallets, helmets, eye protection, and radio equipment to the Capitol grounds, breaching and attempting to take control of the Capitol grounds and building on Jan 6, 2021 in an effort to prevent, hinder, and delay the certification of the Electoral College vote, using force against law enforcement officers while inside the Capitol on Jan 6, 2021, continuing to plot after Jan 6, 2021 to oppose by force the lawful transfer of presidential power, and using websites, social media, text messaging, and encrypted messaging applications to communicate with co-conspirators and others. There are multiple indictments. They are long to read, and they basically tell a long story of what is summarized in the article. There's going to be evidentiary issues as to what was meant when people messaged what constitutes training for the purposes of seditious conspiracy, and what just qualifies as ordinary training and firearms rights. Under the circumstances, you can't really blame people for being skeptical, for being somewhat cynical, having seen the way the FBI, through their attorneys, falsified evidence that they submitted to a FISA court in order to obtain a warrant to spy on Carter Page that they then pivoted into spying on Donald Trump. You can't blame people for being skeptical under the circumstances. Mainstream media admitting that Merrick Garland is under tremendous political pressure to make some headway in his investigation, and Merrick Garland's own answers to some pretty clear questions that leave some serious questions in and of themselves.
As far as we can determine, the individual who was saying he'll probably go to jail, he'll probably be arrested, but they need to go into the Capitol the next day, is then the next day directing people to the Capitol. And as far as we can find, this individual has not been charged with anything. You said this is one of the most sweeping investigations in the history. Have you seen that video or those frames from that video?
So as I said at the outset, one of the norms of the Justice Department is to not comment on impending investigations, and particularly not to comment about particular scenes or particular individuals.
I was hoping today to give you an opportunity to put to rest the concerns that people have that there were federal agents or assets of the federal government present on January 5th and January 6th. Can you tell us, without talking about particular incidents or particular videos, how many agents or assets of the federal government were present on January 6th, whether they agitated to go into the Capitol, and if any of them did?
So I'm not going to violate this norm of the rule of law. I'm not going to comment on an investigation that's ongoing.
All right, so setting aside that non-answer of an answer, I just want to highlight that when someone gets asked a relatively specific and direct question and they start their answer with, so you know you are about to get lied to or misled or deceived, and Merrick Garland, my God, he did it 2 times in 1.5 minutes. All right, just to add that, what the heck are the kids watching back there? Oh, whatever, back to the vlog. And then just getting back to the actual charges in the indictment itself. Count 1, 18 U.S.C. Section 2384, Seditious Conspiracy. The conspiracy from in and around November 2020 through in and around January 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere. The defendants did knowingly conspire, confederate, and agree with other persons known and unknown to the grand jury by force to prevent, hinder, and delay the execution of any law of the United States. Purpose of the conspiracy? The purpose of the conspiracy was to oppose the lawful transfer of presidential power by force by preventing, hindering, or delaying by force the execution of the laws governing the transfer of power, including the 12th and 20th Amendments to the Constitution and Title III, Section 15 of the United States Code. There are other less important charges in the indictments that are going to be more or less relevant to the mainstream media because they have gotten their big charge. They have gotten their seditious conspiracy, the use of force to prevent the transfer of power following the presidential elections. They have their mission accomplished moment a year later. It doesn't matter if all 11 of these defendants are fully acquitted. They have their moment now where they can formally say that January 6th was a seditious conspiracy
to overthrow a duly elected president.
So those are the latest developments on the events of January 6th, and I will be following this to see where it goes. Robert Barnes and I will certainly be discussing this during our next live stream, and if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
Pete, I'm holding iced tea.
If you want to support the channel, all of the support links are in the pinned comment. We've got merch, politics ruins everything. You can find Robert Barnes and I on Locals, where supporters get tons of exclusive content at
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com.
My content is also on Rumble, which has recently merged with Locals, so you can find a nifty little widget to access our community directly from the Rumble page. I'll show you that graphic now. But more important than anything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Now you know your vlog. Peace out.